And welcome everyone to HealingXJWS.com Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nathan Beckman. Also hosting with us today is Augustin Anastacio. Good morning, Gus.
Good morning, Nate.
And for some of you, it might be the afternoon because we're starting this program a little bit later for Marilyn, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Marlene.
Marlene, I'm sorry.
For anybody who Maryland.
Anyone who would like to call into the guest calling number 347-934-0379, and we'll open up lines eventually later in the program to ask any questions or comments or anything like that. So, Gus, go ahead and introduce our guest for today.
Yeah, it's Marlene and Ruben Mercado. Marlene is a retired nurse and a former Jehovah's Witness, and she's going to be sharing both the testimony of her and her husband, who served in the military also. So this is going to be an interesting testimonial, and this week she'll share with us some of the key elements of what let her out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, being a nurse, and next week we're gonna talk at length because Marlene Mercado is an expert in this field. About the blood policy of the Jehovah's Witnesses and how it's evolved and changed from its inception, and what it is currently. So we just want to welcome Marlene and Ruben Mercado to the broadcast. And so, hey, Marlene, welcome.
Good morning.
Well, thank you. I just want to clarify something, that I was not actually a nurse. I was a health unit coordinator. That was the name of the position. And I processed all the doctor's orders for, when the doctor orders something for the patient, I see that it gets done, and I write the instructions on the Cardex for the nurses. So it's like a liaison position between the doctors and the nurses.
Oh, okay, wow. Well, so Marlene, I have to ask you, were you raised a witness, or were you converted to the witnesses? Were your parents Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, actually, I considered myself a third generation because my grandparents emigrated from Sweden in 1912, and they settled in the northeastern corner of Montana. And, it was during the Great Depression, I presume, that the witnesses were going door to door, and they, of course, take advantage of every disaster, whether man-made or natural, to proclaim the end of the world and get new followers. And so that's when my grandparents joined the religion, and they were baptized, and many of their children also became witnesses and were baptized. Now, my mother never was baptized as a witness, but she was always studying with them when I was growing up, and that was clearly her religion of choice. And so she pushed me in that direction because she was, always studying with them.
So I guess your grandparents then were, Dawn Bible students then. They were Rushlites, I guess.
I guess so. Well, they wasn't it 1931 when the name Jehovah's Witnesses was adopted.
Right.
So I'm not sure exactly when they converted. So let's see. My mother was born in 1916, and she listened to the Rutherford broadcasts. Judge Rutherford, the second president of the Watchtower Society, and they had their own radio station. And she, as a teenager, listened to him. So, let's see, she probably, she was 15 in 1931. So that's when, Rutherford would. In fact, they teased her. The family teased her and called her a Rutherford angel.
So, what about your dad? Was he a Jehovah's Witness or?
No, he wasn't. He was military, and so we were many. He was gone from home a lot, and so my mother studying with the witnesses. Maybe that filled some kind of a void, but that was her belief system. And I think later on as things developed, I don't think she liked the blood transfusion doctrine, but the witnesses have evolved over the years to become very strange.
Yes. And that was the time of the radio viola and other clever watchtower inventions, medical inventions.
Yes, and they don't really trust doctors to this day.
Yeah.
And then I married at age 16 into a Jehovah's Witness family. And they were like rabid Jehovah's Witnesses. They'd been bitten by the bug. And my father-in-law, he was a staunch Rutherfordite. That's when he came into the Watchtower Society was, through Rutherford's preaching. And Rutherford had this thing about women. They were no better than a hank of hair and a piece of bone, as he put it. And that attitude was was in that family, that the woman was sort of inferior.
Well, I was actually a voting member of the Pastoral Bible Institute, which is it's basically how the International Bible students now elect their elders, and so you have to be a voting member to vote for your elders. And my experience with the Bible students was they absolutely detest the judge, and they said he was very arrogant, and so it's not surprising to me that he was a misogynist alcoholic, by the way. So
yes, it's well known during Prohibition. He was smuggling booze into this country. He arranged to get his booze during Prohibition, and he was getting it from Canada. And I think the Canadian branch servant there was Walter Salter at the time, and he arranged for Rutherford to get his booze.
So you married to a staunch Jehovah's Witness family at 16. That's very young. And,
yes, and I hadn't graduated from high school yet, and in order to be worthy to marry into this family, I had to be a pioneer. So I spent that summer vacation pioneering so that I would be worthy to marry this guy who I'd met at an assembly, and I only saw him 9 times before we were married.
Wow.
But Armageddon was coming, and you needed to pair up with somebody to go into the new world.
Yeah, what year was this?
I married him in 1957, and that was, I think it was the Russians put the Sputnik up in space earlier in that decade, and boy, things, everybody really thought that it couldn't go on for another 10 years.
Okay.
This system of things, I mean.
Sure.
So I take it that this young man that you married, was it kind of like an arranged marriage then, I guess?
Well, I guess you could say that it was. You know, he was 24, I was 16 when we got married. So he wanted to get married, but he was not self-sufficient, and he was unable to support a wife. So we ended up living with his parents for 2 years, and that was really, really a disaster. And during that time, I went back to high school and finished high school. And you know, when I got out of high school, I really wanted to move out of that home. And there was strong opposition in the family to us moving out. And my husband at that time was actually married to his father. And, you know, they went everywhere together and did everything. And I was just somebody who satisfied his physical needs. And there wasn't really much marital love there. And I began, you know, at the age of 18 then, I began forcing the issue that we should move out of the home. And, you know, that the husband was supposed to leave his parents and cleave to his wife. And
right.
we had a family meeting. And it was me, my husband, his parents, and his brother, and the 5 of us around the table. And my father-in-law, remember, he was the staunch Rutherfordite. He beat his fist on the table, and he said, I know I'm right. I know I'm right. May Jehovah strike me dead if I'm wrong. So then there was dead silence at the table, and I waited for Jehovah to strike him dead. And he didn't.
So I take it, I know because you're married to Ruben now that marriage had to end at a certain point.
Yes, it did. I stuck it out for 10 years, and then I'd had enough. And I got disfellowshipped over that, and that was like 44 years ago. And then I ran off with this sailor named Ruben Mercado. And so I got disfellowshipped over that. But, you know, I wanted to be free of that marriage, but at that point I was not free of the Watchtower. I was totally ingrained in their teachings, totally. So I just had it in mind that I needed to get back in the good graces of the Watchtower because, you know, then, remember in 1966, that's when they came out with this book that we now know was written by Fred Franz, where he pinpointed 1975 as the end of the world. And so I left the Witnesses in 1967, and by the time I got back in, it was 1972. So I just barely making it practically by the skin of my teeth before Armageddon was going to come.
Good thing for you. So we know how that turned out, don't we?
Yeah.
So I guess in 1972, you were with Ruben. Were you guys married at that point?
yeah. And then of course after I got back in, then one of the brothers was having a Bible study with him, and so he eventually got baptized and went along for the ride. Poor man. It was all my fault.
Well, don't worry. You're not the only woman who done suckered her man into that organization. Right in the nick of time of 1975 also, my father-in-law was suckered by his wife into that organization, so just like you. So,
yeah, then poor Ruben, he had these, he was already brainwashed into military service, and then he became brainwashed into the watchtower, so he had this conflicting brainwashing going on. And every time we're at a place where they play the national anthem, that was really conflicting for him because he was very patriotic.
John, Ruben, he never had any of his familia in the Testigos de Jehovah, which is the Jehovah's Witnesses in Spanish, because Ruben's Latino.
Yes. Well,
so most of his family are they Catholic or Pentecostal?
Well, his first wife was raised Catholic, as was Ruben, and she became a Jehovah's Witness. And
wow.
Isn't that bizarre? And she brought up the kids as a witness. So his children now I don't believe they're very religious, but they still have this watchtower idea because one of his daughters, he was visiting with her on the phone one time and about religion, and she said, Jesus is not God, she says. So, the whole family, and all of my extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, they were witnesses or indoctrinated into that religion in one way or another.
So his ex-wife is still currently a Jehovah's Witness then?
No, she got out of it too.
Oh, she did?
She became Pentecostal eventually.
Oh, okay. So she became a Christian, and well, that's good.
Yeah.
So, maybe between him and his ex, and you that maybe somehow you can be a good influence on his children.
Well, I guess anything's possible.
So now, then 1975 came and went, and at this point, were you working in a municipal hospital?
No, I didn't go to college to change my career until I won $20,000 on the Wheel of Fortune, Pat Sajak and Vanna White.
Oh,
and
wow.
I won that money in 1989, and then I went to college, and after that I got a job in the hospital.
You were still a believing witness when you were working in that hospital, right?
Yes, I was.
So what was it that eventually led you to start questioning Jehovah's one and true and only sole organization?
Well, it was if I had to pick one issue, it would be blood transfusion. But I would also have to say that I was really getting weary of their rhetoric and all the money it was costing to go to assembly after assembly and to sit there for hours through these boring meetings. And they would highlight women at these assemblies that seemed to me to be superhuman. Like they could have 4 children and they could be taking care of their dying parents or parents with a disease, but they could also pioneer. And I became so weary of them holding up these impossible examples and making you feel guilty if you couldn't be just as good, that after that one assembly, I said to my husband, we're not ever spending money to come to another assembly. It was just, you just start getting tired after decade of this stuff. You start getting tired of it. And then in the meantime, when any witnesses came into the hospital and refused blood, I was, keeping track of their how low their blood could go, and noticing these things. And then I began to notice when I was working up in the birthplace that they were receiving a blood fraction to treat their Rh immune factor, which it affects 1 in 11 pregnancies where the father is Rh positive and the mother is Rh negative, and the baby is Rh positive. Well, this sets up a reaction, and so I started to research when they first allowed this blood fraction, and it was really bothering me because, I lived through the 1960s where there was extreme blood paranoia. And, if you couldn't get, if a woman wanted to get a permanent in their hair, you had to inquire whether it had any placenta in, because you couldn't get a permanent if it had blood in. You couldn't use plywood because some of the glue, might have a blood fraction in. Stupid stuff like that. And then they were writing candy bar companies to see if the lecithin in the product was from blood. And after that, I noticed that candy bar companies now say soy lecithin when they're listing their ingredients, because they must have got bombarded with letters from Jehovah's Witnesses. And I mean, there was extreme blood paranoia. And some of the booklets that came out at the time, listed stuff like, say, snake bite venom that had blood in. So if you got bitten by a rattlesnake, you couldn't take blood. And so then, little by little, they've backtracked on that. So now there's all kinds of blood fractions that you can take.
Right.
And they're just allowing them one after another, and then they can just say, well, it was a matter of conscience all along. We never said you couldn't take it, but they did. And that's what I call the stringing the gnat era. Yeah. So I was always interested in this blood thing. So one day I was sent to this unit where to work, where they had this patient there who had something called compartment syndrome, which I don't really fully understand this syndrome, but it's like parts of your body are hemorrhaging and other parts are, this man was having a terrible time with his blood clotting. And he had actually used up all of the human factor 8 in the whole area, which is a clotting factor. And so I was transcribing this order, and it said transfuse or factor 8 from pork, but it said porcine factor 8. And, so I was supposed to order this stuff, and I thought, oh, my God, what did they come to? They're putting pig blood in people now. And, I'm like, bovine, that's cow. Feline, that's cat. Porcine, that's pork. And I was really shocked. So I had to order this. I had to order this stuff. Can you imagine factor 8 from pigs? And this is what saved the guy's life. Now, see, he wasn't a witness, but this saved his life, and I was just amazed. And it was that very weekend that a friend told me about Franz's book, Ray Franz's book, Crisis of Conscience. And I went to the library and got it. And just like miraculously, it opened up to page 102 before I even checked the book out, and where he describes how the Watchtower Society now allows hemophiliacs to take factor 8, but they never had published it. So the only hemophiliacs that would know about it is they had called to find out if there was a change in policy, and they just let the others die because they didn't tell them about it. And do you remember how often they would use a story of a hemophiliac as holding them up as shining examples of people who put their lives on the line every day? Because they were refusing the blood fraction that could save their life?
Right.
It's terrible. And it was at that moment that the chains fell away from my brain right there in the library.
Wow.
And then I went through a period of shock, absolute shock, that the Watchtower wasn't true. So, I mean, it was tough. And I never went back to another meeting after that.
Now, how did your husband take to that, though?
Well, I checked out the book, The Crisis of Conscience, and at first, Ruben was really shocked at the way I was behaving. Reading this and reading that, and he would look at me with big eyes like, what's happening to my wife? And then when I showed him about the Mexicans, being able to bribe their government to get out of military service, and yet those brothers in Africa who couldn't pay 25 cents for an identity card, and in was it Rwanda? I can't remember what one of those African countries this was exactly, but
it was Malawi.
Malawi, that's it.
Yeah.
And then he began to see. He started thinking that it was. That kind of got to him, being Latino and all. And then some witnesses came over, at one point and tried to talk us into coming back, and I remember one of them saying, "Get in a lifeboat, Ruben, any lifeboat," meaning go to any congregation, just get in one of those, get in a lifeboat, because we were, we'd fallen out of the lifeboat.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So
what year was this around that you read the book and was sharing it?
This was 1994.
Okay.
So
you're in that congregation for probably more than 15 years then, or?
Well, I was in the Watchtower for 39 years total. From the time.
From 72 to 94, you were in the same congregation?
We were in, I'd say, 3 different congregations here in Spokane, Washington.
Okay.
But yes, that would be correct. But, because we moved, we changed congregations.
So, when Ruben found out about the Mexican Malawi incident, how Mexicans were allowed to get a military cartilla, which is a certificate saying that they had served in the military for, I think, was it a week or a week and a half or something, and fulfilled their duty as Mexican citizens, and about what happened to the poor Malawian witnesses who couldn't even buy a simple political coin. Was that his, I guess, unshackling?
That was his. Yes, that was.
Yeah, because for him, military was important, and that I guess would strike a nerve with him. So you guys both now you realize that the organization is kind of bamboozling you guys. So at what point do you get in touch with trying to find spirituality again?
Well, we left the witnesses in May of '94, and that fall we found out that a local church was teaching a class on cults, and so I was interested in going. And, it was like a Wednesday night class, and the first night that I went, Ruben didn't go. No, I'm not ever going to another church. He said never. And so I went by myself. And the first cult that they were talking about was the Jehovah's Witnesses. And they showed the McGregor film, The Witness at Your Door. Mm-hmm. And I was just blown away. I never imagined that there was any information out there about the witnesses. Just never imagined, and I just, I actually laughed and laughed when they turned the hose on the witnesses. I laughed. In that scene where I just really thought it was hilarious, and the people in the class, they knew I had been a witness because the pastor starts out by saying, has anybody here ever been in a cult? And I raised my hand, and said I'd been a witness. So the people in the class, they were worried that I was going to be insulted or something. But
right.
But I wasn't at all. I thought it was funny, and then I'd taken my son there with me, and he was 13 at the time, and he really liked it too. So we came home and we're telling Ruben all about it, that they were going to show part 2 the next week. So we somehow he was going to drop us off and pick us up later, and we somehow said, well, look, why don't you just come in and see, and if you don't like it, you can leave. I said, this is not regular church. They're just going to show this film about the witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so, part 2, the witness goes out. It was so funny where they were, it was really funny where they were sneaking the baby out of the hospital, and, Sister Beagle and all that. For all the ex-witnesses out there that have seen these films, they're just so terrific. And Ruben has a very loud laugh, and I thought he was going to laugh himself silly.
Maybe loud laughs run with us Latinos, because my wife always says that, in the theater I have the loudest laugh always when I'm out, when we go watch comedy or something.
Yeah. Well, he was
People
really laughing, and the pastor was so nice to him.
Well, you know what? Anyway, those 2 films are meant to be comical, though. They have a comical moment, so.
Yeah, they were.
So he liked the film.
Yes, and then the first time we went into the main church was at a Jews for Jesus performance.
Uh-huh.
And I was really, interested in that, because, Jehovah's Witnesses think they're the real Jews.
Right.
So
and that had to have been very informative, because I've gone, I had Chosen People Ministries or Jews for Jesus, and they've done little small conferences or seminars here in church here too, and it's very informative. So that had to be impressive.
Yeah, it was really, really good, and it was I think it was their singing group, the Liberating Wailing Wall, that because I remember their bus with the big Star of David on it, and really enjoyed it. And then so that got Ruben on the inside of the church, and the pastor was very welcoming. He came over, he says, well, now you can see what we have here. And it sort of made Ruben's fear go away.
Right.
And, then we started, of course, we continued in the cult class, through the Mormons and Christian Science and all of that. And he had an ex-Mormon come and speak, and he showed, for Christian Science, he had another video, and, it was just all very, very informative and very interesting, and that was sort of like the back door into the church. But for me, it really took a long time to accept doctrines like the Trinity. And that's because I think that Christians, by and large, even Christian pastors, do not really understand what the ex-witness is dealing with when it comes to these doctrines. They really don't get it. And I remember in one of his sermons, he said, this pastor said, well, Jesus is Jehovah. And see, I just didn't get that at all.
Right.
You know, I just didn't get it because he did not explain, and I did not understand that when Jehovah or Yahweh is used in the Old Testament, that is really referring to the triune God. That does not mean that the Father is not Jehovah, you know, because the Father is Jehovah, the Son is Jehovah, and the Holy Spirit is Jehovah. I did not understand things like that. Or, you know, the scripture in Deuteronomy 6 where it says, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Right. Well, the Bible that the witnesses use says Jehovah our God is one Jehovah. Right. Well, that's then to understand by that the word for one in Hebrew, echad, means a compound deity, and you know I got that from the Jewish congregation that I visited one time. You know, that was their number one article of faith. We believe in God as a compound deity who is echad, you know. So that was just really helped in my understanding, and you know, I had to ferret out all this stuff with my own Bible study because I couldn't find any pastor to explain it to me where I could grasp it.
Now, what about Ruben at the time? Was he what was your point? I guess where you both accepted Christ.
I actually can't remember a certain date because I always thought that I had accepted Christ.
Right.
But you know, and another thing I should bring out is that my mother allowed me to attend church Sunday schools and vacation Bible schools when I was a kid. So I was going to churches then, and then accepted Christ as much as a child can accept Christ. So, but then I got, you know, waylaid with the witnesses.
Right.
And I think that God knew what he was doing when it put me in, you know, in a position to see all, you know, these patients in the hospital.
Right.
And took the right time to bring me out of it.
Right.
And so
God was working with you through time. You was a work in progress.
Yeah. I mean, you know how some people have a certain date, and at that moment I fell on my knees and asked Christ to come into my heart.
Right.
You know, well, you know, I can say that I've done that, but mine was more like, you know, Jesus, show me the truth.
Right.
Show me, you know, who you really are. It was like that.
Right. So you always had the trust element. You just needed to know the chia. So
yeah,
that is the knowledge of who Christ is.
Yeah.
So so you guys are attending this church. Did you encounter ex-witnesses, or was there ever a point where you guys, and I take it that you wanted to connect with other ex-witnesses?
Yes. I found out about these different groups, and you know, but at first I thought that and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but I thought that other ex-witnesses would be kind of crazy, or it wouldn't be worth contacting them because
right.
I remember somebody at the Witnesses Now for Jesus convention saying, "Oh, I'm just so shocked and surprised at how normal you all are." Well, I think that's what I thought, that anybody who was an ex-witness would just be abnormal in some way.
When me and my wife were driving up to the Witnesses Now for Jesus conference, which is up there in New Ringgold, up on the mountain, and I think my wife was afraid that I was going to get her involved in another cult on a mountain. some Branch Davidians, type, full of ex-witnesses starting their own cult,
Yeah.
But it was a good experience, though. So we want to encourage our callers. We want to encourage our callers at this time. If you have any comments or questions, press 1 so that we can see you on the queue. And if you want to ask Marlene any questions or make a comment about her testimony or the blood issue that Jehovah's Witnesses have, just press 1 and so that we can recognize you on the call line. So,
Marlene, I got a question for you. Have you had any Jehovah's Witnesses come to your door, and what do you say to them?
Yes, they have. They have come to the door quite often. And, well, the first time they came, it was because another witness in the hospital turned me in. When I showed her the form that witnesses were using, and I wrote a note at the bottom, and I says, look at all these blood fractions they're using now. I said, maybe in another 20 years we'll be able to take blood completely. And she turned me in. So they arranged to come over to the house, and we had a big discussion. And they kept asking me, did I believe that the Watchtower was God's organization? And I deflected the question every time. But then I also want to point out that 2 years ago, in this month, January of 2010, they came to my door and they asked me if I wanted to return. And it was the elder that I had mailed our disassociation letter to. And, in that disassociation letter, I was very clear. I said, we, Ruben and Marlene Mercado, want it to be made known publicly that henceforth and forever we no longer want to be known as Jehovah's Witnesses. So that was very clear. And he came to the door and said, we have a program now where if you want to return, you can do that, and we'd like to come in and share a few scriptures with you. And I simply said, no, I do not want to return. I said, as you know, I have a strong disagreement with your blood policy, for one, and I have no interest in returning, so I sent them on their way. But, for those who don't know that they're doing this, they actually came to my door wanting me to return.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, lots of other witnesses have come by, and I've had discussions with them. But it's like talking to a brick wall.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a son, and I take it that we know that he's not a Jehovah's Witness because he helped me get your photo. So.
Yeah.
So I guess he attends a Christian church?
Yeah, he's always gone with us. He doesn't really like church that much. He likes the adult Sunday school at times, but he's a radio listener. He's always got the radio on to a Christian channel.
Oh, okay.
And
you know what? I've heard that. That's not the first time I heard that. We have a lady who just came on our blog site, and she herself said that, I go to this church, but I'm not too crazy about the worship service, but I do like going to the Sunday school.
Yeah. Yeah,
and,
that's...
she thought that the worship service was kind of flaky, so she wants meat. I think one thing is that when we come out of the organization, because the organization is so data-oriented, that is, it's so bent on the importance of knowledge or taking in knowledge, that we might get stuck on that, on that cog for a while, and that, we go to a church that is not too meaty. We're not going to like it there too much, We still want our meat,
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I have to admit that I'm kind of oriented the same way. Like I will like a sermon that has apologetics in it more than, say, an uplifting. I like something that's a real teaching sermon.
Yeah.
But I like the music too. I enjoy the worship service too.
Yeah, I go to a church where we have both a traditional and a contemporary service. I like what each one brings in their own, unique, styles or whatever. But I'm fortunate that actually, it's funny as I go to a Lutheran church, and I'm more of a Calvinist, I guess more of a Presbyterian or Anglican, but I went to a couple Presbyterian churches in the area, and the pastors there, just the sermons were so weak that I wound up going here to this Lutheran church because Pastor Chris is a dynamic speaker and a great teacher. So, I've been out 13 years and I've been to maybe 6 different churches. So I guess you got to do your share of church shopping before you find something. If you can find something in your area, because I know some areas there are a lot of bad churches out here that just don't.
Yeah, there's we are on our 4th church since leaving the Witnesses.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's not.
That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, that's for like 17 and a half years.
Yeah, I went through 6 churches in 13 years, so that's not bad. But I've been at my current church for 7 years, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, that is really good. Yeah, it's Ruben's really come along. He's sung in the choir and sung in the choir in 3 different churches. Actually 4. In all 4 churches he was in choir. So, he's learned how to sing really well in these choirs and
so we have a caller here who wants to make a comment or ask a question.
Okay.
So I'm getting them on right now. It's taking a while. All right. The computer's a little slow here.
I'll hit it for you guys. I think hopefully my side works. Maybe there we go. Caller, you pressed 1. Do you have any questions or comments?
Hi, Marlene.
Yes.
Hi, this is John Inglese from Portchester, New York.
Well, hello, John.
Okay, how you doing? And a great job. I met Marlene many, many years ago at the Mother of All Conventions, or the convention in Pennsylvania. And if she's going to be speaking next week, on the blood show, you're going to have a great speaker. And that's it.
Thanks, John.
The thing is, I'm the president of her unofficial fan club.
Yeah, Marlene knows her stuff when it comes to the blood issue. So
she does.
Next, we're going to definitely concentrate on what the current policy is, and I think there's been some recent changes that Mason Emerson had posted on Facebook. So we're gonna talk about what's going on in the organization as far as their blood policy.
Yeah, that'll be enlightening to a lot of listeners.
Well, I actually have something to share personally about the blood issue. My father-in-law lost his wife over the blood issue. And so his wife, of course, his wife is the one who got him into the organization right in time before 1975. And so she had a tubal pregnancy, and so she passed away because she refused blood. And so my wife wound up growing up without her natural-born mother, and he remarried to an evil stepmother.
Oh.
So right now, he's single, but he came out of the organization a couple of years ago over actually the issue of the military, because he had a business that runs on military bases. So, the blood issue is very personal, for my wife and my father-in-law, because he lost his wife. My wife lost her mother over the issue. And only now, 2 years later, where, witnesses pretty much can accept, all of the components of blood as long as they're, separated.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much that's the policy now. But so it's sad, and it reminds me of what Jesus said to the Pharisees, how they would bind people with ropes and carts, and were unwilling to budge them with just a finger. So this organization typifies the biblical Pharisees in that it places rules and regulations and laws upon the average Jehovah Witness, and when these things are so detrimental, they're just unwilling to lift a finger to relieve their own people that are serving their religion. And it's really sad that people have died unjustly for policies that are no longer in effect. The blood policy is only one of many other medical policies they had. They used to reject organ transplants and vaccinations, and so just think of all the victims and the families.
It's terrible.
It's really sad. It's sad.
My cousin's wife died refusing blood.
Yeah. So and the average witness has no idea of what the blood policy really is. They just know to say no blood, and they have no idea their own organization allows for fractions of blood. In fact, even some elders don't. Years ago, this was when I was actually in a Southern Baptist church when I first came out of the organization. Me and the pastor had a study with two witness elders in the basement of the church. And I said, Jehovah's Witnesses accept blood now, don't you? And they were in utter denial. They said, no, we don't accept blood. I said, but you do accept some parts of blood. They said, no, we don't accept any parts of blood. I said, I have one of your brochures at home, and it says that you accept blood. And he says, no, you must be reading it wrong. So I said, I'll bring it next time. So I brought it, and I read it, and it's in the back of their blood brochure, where it says that it's a conscious decision to accept the primary components of blood. And they said, oh, you're reading it wrong. So even though I was reading it right from their literature, all these elders knew or actually had the brain power to know was that to say no blood, even when I was reading it out of their own literature, because they're so brainwashed, and it's just sad. And so now just imagine these are leaders in their congregation, and all they know to tell the people that are in their congregation is that we don't accept any blood whatsoever, even though it's in the literature saying that you accept primary components of blood. So people in that congregation if they get into a bind, get in a car accident or in some situation, all they know is that they don't accept blood when the organization says that they do. And that's sad. It's really sad.
It is really sad. I had a patient once who was going to have a procedure, just a simple procedure, like an endoscope, I believe it was, and he died on the table. And when the nurse, was calling to tell us that this had happened, she said to me, he wouldn't even accept albumin. Well, I'll bet the poor guy didn't know that he could have albumin.
Right.
So he died.
Yeah. Because it's such a confusing policy that even elders and the average witness all they know is that I think most witnesses probably live by the creed that when in doubt, do without. And so the policy is confusing, but they just, even if the organization is saying you can accept some blood, they'll just do without it because they feel Jehovah will judge them. Because for so many years, the policy was that we don't accept blood whatsoever. And so, it's just it's a mentality that is not evolving even with the organization's policy because it's so confusing.
It is, and back when they first were doing blood transfusions, it was whole blood. Well, now they don't do that. Now that is a total waste. They divide the blood immediately into blood fractions. And, if you are anemic, you get red blood cells. If you have a liver problem, you'll get albumin. It's and it's all divided. The only time I've seen a patient get whole blood is if they've donated it themselves in advance of surgery, and then they get their own blood back.
I even remember, I think the society's policy, I don't know if it's currently the current policy, but I remember the time where they wouldn't even allow for a machine to circulate the blood back into their body and then back into the machine. Because if it came out, it was supposed to be spilled on the ground, according to the old Levitical law.
And then they changed it. Well, as long as the circulation is not broken, if the machine outside the body continues the circulation, then it's okay.
Right. It's strained in that policy, and for those that are unfamiliar, Jesus said that he told the Pharisees that they strained the gnat and they swallowed the camel. And basically, what Jesus was saying was that the Pharisees were so meticulous about certain laws, and one of the laws was that you couldn't even touch something that had died, or you would have to be quarantined from the rest of the camp of Israel. And so when they drank water, they actually literally put their water through a strainer just in case they might swallow a gnat that might die in their throat and therefore have to be quarantined. and yet other things they would swallow the camel on, for example, like divorce. So, basically this organization is oppressing their own Jehovah's Witnesses by being so meticulous about certain laws and rules, and yet being so free with others, like their policies on pedophilia, and where they actually come to the defense of pedophiles over victims. It's a disgusting display of double standards, which is why Ruben saw the double standard of how they treated African Malawian Jehovah's Witnesses as opposed to Mexican Jehovah's Witnesses. How Malawian Jehovah's Witnesses, so you can't buy that political coin, and as a result, unfortunately, the government, killed and raped and pillaged many of those Jehovah's Witnesses in Malawi who refused to participate as citizens in that nation. And yet in Mexico, Mexican Jehovah's Witnesses will say, it's okay for you to bribe officials and to show a document that you actually served your military service and basically lied to the government. So it's just a double standard once again, straining the gnat with one, swallowing the camel with the other.
Yes.
It's a sad situation. Marlene, it looks like any callers who want to make any comments or questions, we're coming to the last 18 minutes in the program. So just press 1 if you have any comments or questions. We had like about 9 callers when the show began, and it dwindled.
We're at a new time right now, guys, and I think a lot of the people that are on Blog Talk Radio don't know what the show is, and some of them were asking questions on the chat room. Is this an Jehovah's Witness site? So definitely we're reaching out to a newer, different time crowd. Right. So we're going to get those new kind of callers coming in and coming out. So the blood policy of a person's blood actually going into a machine, coming back, going out of his body, coming back into his body, is that approved or disapproved by the Watchtower Society?
That's now approved.
Yeah.
Okay. And
like
I remember it as being disapproved.
Surgery.
I thought once it left the body, it was dead. And I'm thinking back in the 90s.
Yeah. Go ahead, Marlene.
I don't know exactly when they changed that, but in the beginning of the blood policy, they would quote the Old Testament scripture that when blood leaves the body is to be poured out on the ground and covered with dust. So once it leaves the body, it's not supposed to be used for anything, any way, anyhow, nothing. So that's why they were against using any blood in, say, in the glue and plywood or, in permanence or anything else. You weren't supposed to use it for anything. And over the years, things have really changed. And I think that they really want to do, the modern generation governing body would like to do away with the blood policy. And they are actually doing away with it little by little, but they're still saying that they don't accept blood. So, they're really hypocritical over this.
Right. Well, and probably each individual member, they've heard no blood for such a long time that it doesn't matter what comes out of the society, they've already made their mind up from what they've heard for so many years, not to receive any blood or anything, blood partitions or anything like that. I actually donate my plasma, and I could say that the cycle does stop, and then it starts up again. So I'm a little bit wondering, how do they view plasma, and how would they view, a pill form of what they take of what plasma is? I'm not quite sure if they're condoning people donating their plasma. It's a separation of red blood cells from the plasma, and those blood cells get returned back into you. But I kind of wonder if they would look at plasma and those medications as, it's horrible people are donating plasma. I don't know. I don't know what
well,
Jehovah's Witnesses
I
would
do
think.
know. I do know. I can tell you that after you donate your plasma, there are so many important components of plasma, and these are all separated from the plasma and used for different things. When I give my talk on blood, I pass out a paper that shows 13 different components of plasma that are used in medicine, and Jehovah's Witnesses accept all of these. And after all of these are spun out of the plasma, all that's left is water. So what are the witnesses objecting to? It must be the water they object to, because they accept everything else.
Sure. Interesting.
So, you can't accept plasma, by itself. You can only accept a blood fraction if it's spun out of plasma. Then you can have it.
Crazy.
It's insane.
We're going to have her on next week, right?
Yeah. We have Marlene on next week, and we're going to discuss at length the current blood policy and how it's evolved through the years, and Marlene will be able to give us a little bit of what she normally gives in her seminars. And so,
awesome.
Yeah, I want to thank Marlene for coming on the show today, and it'll be the same time next week, special time, 1 o'clock Eastern time, 12 o'clock, I believe it's Central, and 11 o'clock Mountain, and 10 o'clock Pacific. So just want to get our audience ready for next week. We're going to talk about blood transfusions and Jehovah's Witnesses, and maybe a little bit about the other medical quackery that they have participated in along the way.
Yeah.
And so this week we concentrated mostly on the testimonial portion of Marlene and Ruben, and thank you, Marlene, for sharing your story with us. And we look forward to talking at length more about the blood policy of the Watchtower Society, and hopefully alert the public, and maybe some doctors might listen, or some hospitals to this program, and so that they could be a little more aware of what Jehovah's Witnesses have to deal with as far as the contradiction and double standard. I really hope some judges will look at the program too.
Because I did have a doctor in the audience once, and afterwards he said, well, I used to just mark their charts no blood. He says, but now that you've told me about this, I'm going to have to change my approach.
Right. So thank you for coming on the program. Just letting everyone know, next Saturday, February 3rd, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, we're going to have Marlene, and we're going to talk about blood transfusions in the Watchtower Society. And call in at 1-347-934-0379, and don't forget to press 1 when you want to make a comment or question. So thank you, Marlene, for your time.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. I hope the listeners enjoyed it.
Yes, and I'm sure a lot of people will be listening via podcast, because I had a lot of people talking about the program on my Facebook page. So.
Okay.
So until next week.
All right, then.
Thanks, Marlene.
You're totally welcome.
And for those who want to get on our blog site, we'll not forget we have a blog site with over 350 ex and current Jehovah's Witnesses as members. You want to join the discussion, come on www.healingxjws.ning.com and join the blog site, or look us up on Facebook at Healing HJWS and like us on our page. So until next week, everyone, have a great day and enjoy the weekend.
Bye.
Bye.